It's interesting to think about games, movies, series, where the bulk of what's been released in that series is actually bad, it's low quality. I think about, say, The Simpsons, where it's gone on so long that the bulk of it's mediocre compared to, say, classic Simpsons in its first few years. Star Wars is certainly on that list. And Indiana Jones isn't far off. The original trilogy is great, but since then we've had the Crystal Skull, which no one liked. The Dial of Destiny, which just felt like, please just kill this. Everyone's had enough of you trying to resurrect these old IPs that are past their prime. So the movie series, when it comes to Indiana Jones, doesn't look like it's going to continue anytime soon. But surprisingly, Indiana Jones in the video game space hasn't always been too bad. For instance, we had The Fate of Atlantis, one of the great point-and-click adventures from many, many years ago. That is the greatest piece of Indiana Jones media since the original trilogy. It captures the original tone. It's got fantastic puzzles, characters. It is a great time, and it doesn't matter how old it is. But now in 2024, we're going to be getting Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which I don't believe is going to be a point-and-click adventure like Fate of Atlantis. But nevertheless, this is by MachineGames. We've known about it for a while, and these guys are the Wolfenstein developers. So they're known for FPS. I believe that studio came from Starbreeze. You might be familiar with, say, the Darkness games. The head of this game, I believe the director, or at least a senior head, he was also responsible for the Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay, I think it was, which is a fantastic game. It's hard to get a hold of now, but a very nice first-person shooter, stealthy kind of game. It's really nice. But I'm thinking about the Great Circle because it doesn't seem to just be a first-person shooter like MachineGames' previous titles. Maybe there are some immersive sim elements. They have talked about approaching situations differently. There's obviously puzzles. I don't think it's going to have any real RPG elements to it, which it shouldn't. Not every game needs to be an RPG. This should be a linear Indiana Jones story, but I'll be curious to see if there's some depth to the gameplay. Before this was all announced, I assumed we were probably just going to get like an Uncharted clone, and that was about it, but it seems to be something more. I like that it's in first person. I've seen a lot of people whinge and go, oh, I want it to be third person like literally every other mainstream game out there. I like this. It was the same for Cyberpunk, for instance. I love that title, they stuck to first person. I think it's one of the most immersive ways to craft the experience, and that's why I'm curious if there'll be immersive sim elements in this one. So we're gonna go through some of this reveal and really go into maybe how the gameplay is going to go.
We are really excited to finally be able to share our work on Indiana Jones. In this game, you aren't just playing as Indy, you are Indiana Jones. You will see through his eyes and experience a journey that we hope lives up to the proud legacy of Indiana Jones. When Todd Howard first told us about his vision for the game, we knew we would be a very good fit to help bring it to life.
I've wanted to make an Indiana Jones game forever.
Very curious that Todd Howard managed to get his claws into this one. So supposedly he came up with the story. The other thing I wonder with that is that's sort of used as a selling point. Like, Todd Howard's so passionate, he's the architect for coming up with the story. Did anyone making this go back and play some of Bethesda's games? Most of the main stories are totally rubbish. They're some of the worst parts of the games. People clown on the main stories of Fallout 3, Fallout 4 all the time, and it's difficult to find really intriguing quests in some of those games. Now, to be fair, it's not as if Todd Howard is head writer. He's just come up with probably the concept. Now he's the executive producer. He's handing some of those responsibilities over. So it doesn't mean a lot, but it's certainly not the case that I'm totally pumped. Oh, if Todd Howard's come up with the story, this is going to be a classic, no doubt. I'm sold.
I'd had this idea for what it would be like and the story, what Indy was going after, what period of his life it was in, what kind of arc he was going to have. And as the years went on, I thought, who would be like the best studio in the world to make this? And it was my friends at MachineGames. I can remember pitching Lucasfilm on the game and being, a little bit nervous because, look, it's, Indiana Jones, and their response was just overwhelmingly positive, and just that excitement has bled through the whole project.
I mean, do Lucasfilm or do they turn down anything? Because the amount of just crap in Indiana Jones, Star Wars these days, it's not a very high bar, so I'm sure they were excited. They seem to greenlight just about anything.
And they have just been so trusting and supportive of everything that we want to do with the game. It's been a long time. I've been a fan of this my whole life, and I couldn't be more excited to show you what the team here has been up to. Let's take our first look at the new Indiana Jones game.
Whoa. I'm always nostalgic at the Lucasfilm logos, all of those days of Monkey Island, point-and-click adventures.
History. Just different ways to interpret the past.
This is the Candyman, by the way.
Thousands of years of humanity's thoughts and beliefs, scattered and buried.
There's some of the puzzles.
Just waiting to be found.
You can't just run away from your problems, Indiana.
Watch me.
Okay, so here we sort of start to see some of the gameplay, and it's important to really look at what's on the screen, because as we know these days, the developers promise the world. They'll tell you all these generic things like, you can make your own choices, you can play your own way, you are literally Indiana, you're in his shoes. That's fine, but I want to see what I'm actually going to be doing practically. And they do talk about the whip in some more detail a bit later, but kind of just going back slightly, we also saw, I think it was this hammer. So you can sort of pick things up in the environment. You didn't start with this, you've literally picked it up. And I'm just thinking about the level design as well. I mentioned earlier that I really didn't like Wolfenstein New Colossus. Now, for me, it was a not really an enjoyable game for a number of reasons. First of all, the story quality. The cutscenes in that game were genuinely embarrassing. Maybe it came at a time where everything had to be even more political than it is now, but there was just something about it that was just really cringe in basically all the wrong ways. So I didn't like the story, and given this game, they're really selling it on that narrative, it being almost like an Indiana Jones movie as a game, I'd really have to think that the writing there has improved since at the studio, and I'm really not sure, because New Colossus was basically their last really big game. There was Youngblood, I think that was a smaller title, then they've been working on this. So even though people talk about, oh, MachineGames, the people behind this, they've got a great lineup of previous games, well, their most recent titles, they have not been good, and it's probably best to go off them, because New Colossus was what, like 4, 5, 6 years ago? That was still a while back, and now they're bringing us this next, so it's probably been like a decade since they've released anything of genuine quality. Now, the level design in New Colossus, that was absolutely atrocious. I just didn't feel like I was playing a traditional FPS, at least the way I enjoy. If you go back to the older Dooms, Quake 1, Nobody Lives Forever, these sorts of games, you were kind of going through mazes. Exploration just felt really good in some of those older FPS titles, and in more modern AAA FPS games like Doom Eternal, they're fine, they're fun, but they're more like arenas instead of actually exploring levels and going through them in a linear fashion, which I like. The New Colossus was kind of the worst of that. You didn't really have the fun gameplay, the arenas of Doom Eternal, but you didn't have the mazes of older first-person shooters either. They were like rooms you would go through and you would have to kill the 2 colonels before you could progress. The enemies, there were barely any of them. It was just the same old Nazis, a couple of super soldier type enemies, barely any variety, and there's just nothing memorable about it at all. There's no deep exploration. The story sucked, which they tried to sell us on in New Colossus like they're doing here. And the level design was just extremely poor. There was nothing I liked. The shooting mechanics, they were fine, but there wasn't that much going on. So for that reason, I've just been very on the fence about this one. I see people getting excited about it, but I don't know, the track record, nothing I'm seeing here really disproves anything. We can see the level here where you can probably, oh, I can go up here, I can climb the scaffolding, or I can throw a hammer at the guard and blaze my way through. It seems like there are going to be some immersive sim elements, so I hope things have improved from the New Colossus. That's all I can say.
Throughout history, mankind has built sites of great spiritual significance. If you were to draw a line through these ancient sites around the globe, you get a perfectly aligned circle.
The voice acting's fine as well. I mean, it's obviously not going to be 80-year-old Harrison Ford in a video game. I can be realistic. We don't have to worry about that. I mean, the Great Circle, talking about, oh, we've drawn the circle. It doesn't sound that interesting, does it? I mean, the title's just one thing. If someone announced to me the Temple of Doom in year 2024, I'd be like, that sounds generic. So I'm not going to criticize it too much. But you just hear the Great Circle. You're not really on the edge of your seat. But it's all right. I'm not going to be too much of a critic. So there is that third person to first person, and they show another example later, but I think this is another one here. So we can sort of see it here. I mean, it looked okay the way that they did it. I think it's a little bit of a gimmick in that it's just when you're swinging on the rope or the whip or when you're sort of climbing up a pole or something like that. Not too much. When I first heard it was going to be first person and third person, I assumed it was really going to be part of the gameplay. Like maybe you would do fist fights, for instance, in third person, and maybe specific shooting sections were in first person. It doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like 90% of the game, at least, is going to be in first person, and it's just little cinematic moments that are going to be in third. I think that's okay, because you can't really be the master of everything when you develop a video game. If you try and do a really great first person section and then have really amazing third person sections, you're probably just going to stuff up both to an extent. You've only got so much development time. So I'm fine with this. Given it's an established character, you probably want to see them at some point, or people are going to be a little bit disappointed. Not everyone loves first person as much as I do. It's nice to see they're at least focusing. They're focusing on one discipline, which is the first person.
I've had run-ins with these guys before. Trust me, it ain't a walk in the park.
Indiana Jones is such an iconic character, and he means so much to so many people. Everyone here at the studio has their own indie stories and memories. Most of us grew up with his adventures and have been fans of the movies and the character for years. He's a brilliant archaeologist, he's a charismatic everyman.
I've got to be honest, this person doesn't look like the typical 2024 video game developer, which is a good thing, by the way. I'm saying that as a positive, because in a second, you're going to see the stereotype.
He's passionate and determined. And for us, he's synonymous with adventure.
Now we have the opportunity to tell...
Yeah, I told you. You had to get ready for it. This is modern video games, unfortunately.
a new Indiana Jones story for a modern gaming audience. Our game is all about putting you in Indy's shoes, letting you see and feel what he sees and feels. For us at MachineGames, we do that best through first person. It's the ideal perspective to bring you into the rich, exciting and interactive world we've built. We believe that being up close and personal to the adventure is key, making each action feel like your own.
Whether it's cracking your whip, solving puzzles in ancient temples, or seeing your knuckles go bloody in a...
Just going to that puzzle.
Solving puzzles in...
I just hope that there are so many AAA games where they are really, really scared of the player just being a dumbass who doesn't want to think. They just want their next dopamine hit, go on to the next level, no thinking or any slowdown involved. I really just hope there is some thought into the puzzles. You think about like Skyrim and games like that where there's like a lever puzzle, but it's just so basic it doesn't hold you up at all. It can actually be nice for the pacing, because if you have an interesting puzzle that does sort of force you to take your time, take in your surroundings and think about it, it can be a good break until the next maybe combat encounter, for instance. Baldur's Gate 3 has a few of them. There's plenty of games these days that still do that. So I just hope they're not scared. I think it might have been Horizon, the PlayStation series, Horizon Zero Dawn, and so on, where the character you're controlling, the second you get to a puzzle, they're already basically giving you clues and almost solving the puzzle for you. You're getting sort of talked to by the voice actor saying, hey, here's how to solve the puzzle, we don't want you to be confused. And it's in there by default. It's not like an accessibility option or something. They basically ruin it because they're scared. They think you're an idiot, which is a shame. I just hope it's not the case here. They at least have some respect for their audience, but given it's Indiana Jones, they're going to want this to sell gangbusters. I don't know. Probably going to set some expectations with the puzzles. Although they do mention, I think a little bit later on, that the puzzles in some cases are optional. So maybe that means that's their compromise. The puzzles are there, but you don't have to do them. And maybe that'll mean they're not totally stupid. Hopefully they're somewhat interesting.
In ancient temples, or seeing your knuckles go bloody in a fist fight. All of these moments are much more intense in first person.
We always talk about how clever Indiana Jones is. That had to be one of our guiding principles when we were thinking about the type of game we were making. It wouldn't be Indy if he wasn't using his wits to get through the situation.
Okay, here we go.
The most authentic Indiana Jones experience we can make is the one that makes you think first.
Think. I like that word.
Getting the hang of this.
Sure, there will be some obstacles that will be more easily overcome with the revolver or a gun taken from a disarmed guard. But I think most of the time you'll have more fun, and to be honest, a more genuine indie experience by finding more clever ways to solve a problem.
We always...
So that's what got me thinking about the immersive sim elements that he talks about. You can go in guns blazing, but there might be other way to solve problems, hopefully around the level, and the design of that level is built around that. So we'll see how in-depth it gets. Again, I don't think it's going to be genuinely like immersive sims we've played in the past, a Dishonored or a Deus Ex or something. But if it has some of that, at least it's going to be more than what I probably expected from this game before it got revealed to us. I just assumed it'd be third-person action-adventure, some first-person thrown in, nothing too much beyond that Uncharted-like experience. But it seems to be something more, so there could be some potential. I hope so anyway.
One of our mottos for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is adventure first. But in every indie adventure, there are always those moments where he finds himself in the action.
That's been one of those balancing acts for us, and we've ended up with this sort of hybrid experience.
This is the guy from Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay. So at least there are some people on the team who have done great things in the past beyond like the early Wolfenstein games, at least.
Mixes melee combat, stealth, and gunplay.
And when you can't use your wits, you got Indie's most iconic tool. Just like you see in the movies, one of our goals has been to make the whip as fun and multi-purposed as possible. We want it integrated into every aspect of the game.
You can use it as a traversal tool to make your way around the environment. You can use it as a distraction. And yes,
my only concern is they're obviously hyping up the whip and it is iconic and everything. I just hope it's not sort of a, you use the whip, you're definitely going to win sort of tool, and then it just totally takes out the environment. Because it's like, am I going to pick up the shovel or the hammer, for instance, to use as a weapon when I can just use the whip? Hopefully there's a little bit of balance there. There are pros and cons to using the whip in situations versus using the environment. It's hard to say without playing it. We'll see.
You can absolutely use it in combat.
So even in
everything you'd expect from Indie's whip, and hopefully a little bit more. Puzzles are a key feature in our game. The spirit of discovery is so important to Indiana Jones. Obviously, there are a handful of puzzles on the main path, but a lot of the puzzles are optional and are just there for the players who want to experience them. Epic traps.
So that gives me some confidence. If the puzzles were mandatory, you know, they'd just be massively dumbed down in pretty much all situations. But they mentioned sort of mostly optional, it sounds like, if not all optional. So that'll be cool. That means you can sort of take that break, maybe do something that does have a bit more thinking involved. But it's not going to leave the developers thinking we've got to make this just so stupid that anyone can do it, lowest common denominator. Otherwise, we're going to get criticism from like IGN or something like, oh, you didn't make it accessible enough for everyone. That's not fair. So at least maybe the puzzles will be all right. That makes me optimistic.
Small secrets and hidden puzzles that blend right in with their surroundings.
I'm also very excited to announce that Indiana Jones and the Great Circle will be coming later this year. And we cannot wait to share more soon.
There are a lot of reused clips across this, like all of that we just saw, that little montage. That's all stuff they showed before, and some of that showed up more than once. So I just wonder about that 2024 release date. I know Microsoft are probably pushing really hard after all of the criticism they've had for just going sort of years without releasing anything of note, despite owning all of these studios. They start to look stupid, let's be honest. So I do have to wonder if they're really pushing this now, the 2024 thing, not even necessarily because it's likely it's going to come out this year and Microsoft are going to force them to release it, but that it at least creates a narrative now, January, the start of the year, that 2024 is going to be a good year for Microsoft. Maybe Microsoft themselves even know this will probably get pushed into 2025, but they'd rather not say it now and leave people sort of underwhelmed for the rest of the year. Might not be the case. Maybe it does actually release this year and it's genuinely ready, but it is, I suppose, a bit rarer these days. I know it happens, but it is rarer that a game gets announced in terms of actually seeing gameplay, seeing what's going on, not just a teaser trailer, and then it arrives this year. Games just seem to get delayed all the time. If anything was going to get moved, it would probably be this for Microsoft, but also Avowed looked a bit underdone as well, so I don't really know. Are they going to release and Microsoft won't care? If they are a little bit half-assed, if they're not quite ready, they're just desperate to push things out. So that's something to speculate on. The game itself, I will be cautiously optimistic. There are games like this I'll often just kind of write off and think, yeah, it's just going to be another generic open-world sandbox modern AAA game. This is obviously a bit different. Again, I'm disappointed with what MachineGames have done previously with like Wolfenstein II, the new Colossus. However, there's plenty they're doing here that they didn't have to do. It could have just been generic Uncharted. They're making it more like an immersive sim, first person. I think that's a risk given some of the criticism I've seen from probably just casual fans of indie who want to play a video game in the universe. They don't care about games that much outside that. I've seen people whinge, oh, I want to be indie all the time. I want to see him. I've got to play in first person. That sucks. I don't agree. I like the first-person nature of it. I like what we're hearing about maybe using the environment, stealth, approaching situations differently. They've got to deliver on it, of course, but at least it's sounding solid. There is the puzzles as well. That could be nice. I think if it's a nice mix of maybe the action-adventure that we would expect with the downtime, with the puzzles and so on. Take me back to Fate of Atlantis. I know it's not the same sort of puzzles, but just something to get me thinking. That would make me happy. It's not a game that I'll probably be losing sleep over in excitement in anticipation of it coming out, but I'll probably check it out when it releases. If word of mouth is solid, if they deliver on this, why not? It's probably going to be a fun time, and I'd like to see more first-person games like this do well, because whether it's a genuine immersive sim or not, it probably isn't. Just having those elements, hopefully we can see that in more games, because I worry about, say, Deus Ex. I worry about Arcane. I want to see more of those sorts of games do well. So thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.